Welcome into the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Good show today, folks. We're going to get deep into it with our guest Don Hill today, as we're going to talk a little God helmet and some other circumstances having to do with our world today. It's a complex subject, but an interesting one that Don brought to my attention. He is continuing the work of Michael A. Persinger, who's a professor of psychology, a neuroscientist, and renowned investigator of the paranormal. He passed away, unfortunately, in 2018. He was 73 at the time, a pioneer of, and I'm going to try and get this right, a pioneer of neurotheology. There we go.
Well, let me help you, Tim. Here, okay. I mean, these are big words, you know.
They are. I'm sorry.
Two old guys talking here. Neurotheology.
Right. I got new trifocals here, Don. So it skipped the line in my trifocals.
That's why I said two old guys, and I got the same situation here. So
his experiment.
I'll help you.
His experiments with the so-called God helmet identified neurocorrelates in the human brain that map the sense of presence attributed to the supernatural. Dr. Persinger leaves behind a complicated legacy, although you have a Substack out there, Don, which is wonderful, and I've already been combing through it, which he entrusted to his colleague and his friend, Don, who's with us today, to chronicle. Don's legacy project is unusual in that he's amplifying Michael Persinger's digital footprint to attract scrapers, which is building world models, and LLM, which is large language models for AI applications. Dr. Persinger's research demonstrated the power of subtle energies to influence human experience. The question here now is it possible to create the conditions for subtle persuasion in digital applications? And if so, Michael Persinger's personal insights, recorded conversation, research papers, and other outstanding content Don is releasing into the wild has considerable value at that point. So we're going to talk to Don today about everything that he's put together, the stuff he's put on Substack already with his conversations with Michael A. Persinger, which is some intriguing stuff at that. And not only is it available on video, but he also has the transcripts available as well, which I've been putting into Speechify, which it reads it right back, the transcripts as well. And talk a little bit about the stuff you've been doing with the God helmet, which I find fascinating. So let's bring in right now Don Hill. Don, how are you today?
Well, I'm as well as can be expected under the circumstances. Can you imagine how crazy it's getting in the world right now? What does 6 weeks out from now look like, Tim?
I don't know, Don. You know, I wake up every day and, you know, I'll tell you something about this particular show. I try to hold my cards close to the vest, right? And you know this as being a good broadcaster, and you've been a broadcaster for years. You try to hold your cards close to the vest because you have listeners and viewers on both sides of the aisle, right? And I've worked both sides of the aisle in radio. I've worked on conservative stations. I've worked on liberal stations.
Oh, I thought for a minute you were saying that you worked at a disco station and a hip-hop station. But, you know, the two worlds just don't meet, do they? I get it.
I've worked. I actually have. I've worked top 40. I've worked country.
You like ABBA? You like ABBA?
Well, I like one song.
Well, we have standards, right? Mm-hmm. I'm just kidding. I like ABBA. So what I'm trying to get, it's SOS time out there.
It is,
you know? Yeah. Oh, it really is. And that's what Michael Persinger, among other people, were trying to alert us to what's going on in the so-called zeitgeist, which means the sort of collective unconscious of our humanity, whether it's in America or where I am in Canada. And right now, people are pretty rattled, not just on either side of the line, but they're also rattled by, let's call it for what it is, solar cycle 25. The Earth is getting bombarded with our friends, the sun's energies. That's why we're seeing the aurora, the northern lights, as far down as Florida at this time of the year. So what is that doing to mammalian brains? What is that doing to birds in flight? And all these kinds of questions. And that's what Michael Persinger was asking about 25, 30, 40 years ago. And I had the ability at the time to record these conversations. And I've been putting them back out there. Kind of like listening to you, Tim, having a longer conversation with somebody that sort of goes here, there, and everywhere, not completely focused, so to speak, because it's meant to be more of a conversation. And to find out things, just like the old Art Bell show that you used to work with way back when, to find out what people are actually thinking and give them a space to dream out loud, to say what they wanted to say, rather than what's going on right now, arguably in the culture. People are muting themselves, or they're shouting at each other. Like you're in Minneapolis, St. Paul, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
A team, B team, red team, blue team. What about no team? What about what about just? Let's just listen to what these people are trying to tell us. And what they're trying to tell us is things are different now.
Mm-hmm.
And we have no idea what I said 6 weeks is going to look like. What's a year out look from now with regards to artificial intelligences? So I'll cut to a piece there that probably didn't make a lot of sense for people. Why would he be giving all this information, and he wants digital scrapers meaning that just suck in all the content to build a large language model? Well, what's interesting about the folks who are looking to be immortal is I'm in the flesh right now.
Yep.
And so are you, Tim. Right?
Yes, indeed.
And when this flesh disappears, where do our stories go? Well, we're making them up right now. We're putting them out there as in a medium called radio, or for that matter, audio, okay?
Yep.
Now, you and I are the outcome of many, many generations that are locked and recorded in our DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And what if it's the same in the digital verse, the digiverse, and that you don't need to be Tim or Don, but you need to perhaps have aspects of Tim or Don influencing the future? Would that not be more powerful, like a hidden persuader? You don't have to be upfront about things. You just have to be behind sort of, I'm not saying that we're puppets or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So these are the kinds of conversations that are going on right now. If you can influence a digital avatar or whatever, and all of these kinds of things, we don't know what that actually means, because we're literally making it up as we go along. In terms of the apps that we're making, the agents that we're using right now to work on our behalf. Now, I know I'm sounding a bit nuts right now, or maybe not, but these are the conversations we were having 25, 30 years ago. This genius guy that I had the luxury of meeting and calling later as a friend, Michael Persinger, actually saw these things and was able to discuss them with anybody who was honest enough to say, I don't know, and B, I'm willing to find out and check out where my curiosity takes me.
If I can go back,
ahead. I want you to leap in there.
Just a second here, Don. You talk about being immortal, even digitally. Isn't that kind of why people right now, anybody with a computer and a microphone is trying to do a podcast or because everybody wants to be immortal digitally? They think that maybe this is my claim to fame. This is how I'm going to spread my seed digitally and put myself out there into the stratosphere and grab a little bit of fame on YouTube. And maybe that will be my imprint digitally.
I think first off, I think it's an excellent summary of what is likely going on right now. Because, let's face it, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
And just let that land there. And we go, well, maybe not me. As I said, there was a writer years ago. He said, when it comes to death, I thought in my case there would be an exception. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So all these folks pursuing legacy projects, they go multi-billionaires and trillionaires, and we're going to have a trillionaire soon. I think we already have one. And what are the first thing that our elders did? Let's just say a generation or two. They would go to any community college, any university, and they'll say they got their name on a building. And that was their legacy. The Johnny Glutz School of something, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But we're in a new era now, or error, depending on your point of view. Okay? Error. And what legacy actually means might be more in keeping with digital epigenetic memory. Now, what do I mean by epigenetics? Experiment that took place many, many years ago, and I'll just condense this. Tim, stop me if I go off the deep end here, okay? Just make sure you're done, that you're getting crazy, stop it, okay? So what happened was they wanted to find out what happens when you subject mice, these are laboratory mice, to a shock or some kind of exposure to trauma, okay? Mm-hmm. And that sounds kind of mean, but they wanted to find out, what do we mean by post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, okay? Right. And that was considered to be, what are you talking about? That's noise, this is crazy, get over it, okay? Whatever it is that's happening. And what they discover, because mice reproduce very rapidly, okay, is that the initial trauma that was exposed, let's just say like Pavlov's dog, a bell, right? And then salivation or whatever you choose to call it, that exposure to trauma 2 or 3 or 4 generations later on the mice, by exposing them again to the same trigger, the mice had the same reaction. And that's known as epigenetic memory. It jumps generations, but that trauma is still there embedded in the DNA, so to speak. Okay. Now, if you take that into account, what I said is that there will be generations, and like, for example, Native Americans are claiming, as much as First Nations in the country I am in, that they have long-term generational trauma. And the evidence suggests that that is true. Now, what we don't know is what the remediation is. Like, how do you get over it?
Right.
And some of these ideas, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when it comes to people who say that now I'm going to take a leap here, folks. I'm leaping, okay? People who claim to say that they see lights in the sky or these kinds of things, we're not entirely sure if there's in the landscape, in the environment, a trigger that's going on in the environment, okay, that actually triggers that epigenetic memory. Because if you look at, or something that's going on in the environment. But if you look at the history of what's been recorded as high strange phenomena, you'll often see there's some kind of, traumatic event. For those of you who are Christians, you will know that when you hear the sound of the angel's trumpet and a burst of light, and the first thing you hear from the angel is "Fear not,"
right? Yeah.
Right. What really means, oops, something's about to happen here, folks, and maybe it's time to run for the hills, right? So you can see this in just about every major religion in the world. There's these traumatic events that can jump generations and have been recorded not only as stories, but in our epigenetic DNA memories as well.
Don, you got me thinking about something else too. At least here in the States, you talk about slave plantations, and you talk about paranormal investigations on plantations, and you talk about residual hauntings or even active hauntings. The fact of the matter is you can still step onto a plantation these days and get horrible, horrible EVP of some traumatic active, whether they be active or residual EVP of African Americans. And I think to myself, okay, that happened 150, 200 years ago. You could get, and I'm just thinking to myself of that particular trauma. If that still exists and I can get it with an audio recorder, then how long does it stick in the DNA?
Well, let's just unpack a bit of what you just said for just a moment, okay? Well, first off, I have to challenge you a bit because this is what Dawn does. With regard to recordings with white noise or radio spectrum going back and forth, we tend to, I don't like using the word hallucinate, but we tend to, it's like people who look at clouds or rock faces will see faces.
Sure.
We do that. We also do the same thing with audio. There's some very important experiments were done by somebody at, I'm going back in time here. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Give me 5 words right now. Just make them up right now.
Rock, paper, scissors, Coke, light.
So as rap, paper, scissors, Coke, light. Rap, scissor, Coke, paper, light.
Rock, paper, scissor, Coke, light.
Rock, paper, rock, paper, scissor, Coke, light.
Yep.
Rock, paper, scissor, Coke, light. Rock, paper, scissor, Coke, light. Rock, paper, see what's starting to happen?
Yeah.
Or maybe you're not. We're starting to hear other things in that wash. And it might be because you're at a plantation, okay? You're aware of the subjective realities that happen there, and you may or may not be adding into that mix after you do this white noise routine. Now, again, later on, I'll send you a link to what I'm talking about rather than me babbling on here. I'm not explaining away your experience, okay?
Okay.
You're in the great state of Minnesota right now, and you would be familiar with so-called rock art locations. Now, what's that? These are Native American sites where pictographs or what petroglyphs are pecked right into the rock. Okay. and you know where you are in the great state of Minnesota, is that there's a lot of tectonic strain, a lot of granite around there. Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
And by the way, what I'm getting at, these rock art locations are often curious because they often point toward some phenomena that's either occurred in the landscape nearby or mark something that actually happened there. And what I usually do when I go into these locations over the years is I've been measuring what we call electromagnetic fields actually generating in the space itself, or if there's some other phenomena going on, including infrasound below the level of hearing, around Lake Superior, for example. There's a lot of interesting locations. And sure enough, there's rock art that our ancestors have marked saying something's going on here. And that's interesting. So why am I telling you all this? That something is going on in the landscape. It can be a very, very modest, small, seeming inconsequential trigger, but if there's something going on in the environment, and I don't mean to say this, Minneapolis, St. Paul has been a very volatile place lately,
Sure.
and it doesn't take a lot to get people excited.
Okay.
All right?
Right.
So if that's going on in the environment, and then you have a subjective story, that's ultimate mind control. You whip up the crowd, then you add just a little bit more. And it could be a haunted house. It could be all kinds of things. But I'm not denying that this phenomena exists. Why? Because I went through it myself. That's what started the whole thing. I lived in a haunted house. And that, which led me to Michael Persinger, was to get a grip on what was going on. We can talk a bit about that if you wish.
Yeah, let's do that. But let's do this first. Let's take a break here, Don.
Yep.
Because you've brought up an interesting question with me, and that's this.
Yep.
In one respect, you kind of want to put some cold water on EVP in that phenomena, but in the other respect, you're saying, well, I grew up in a haunted house, and I want to acknowledge that this phenomenon is here.
That's right.
So one part of you says, yeah, there's science, but on the other hand, yeah, but there's this phenomena here. So,
well, I'm saying both. I'm saying is
right.
Either explanation isn't adequate for what perhaps we can answer in the next 5 to 10 years because of the new hardware we have. For example, right now, Tim, I know we got to go to a break,
Sure.
but you and I, when we did radio 20 years ago, okay, and we had to get satellites going together, remember,
Yep.
coast to coast?
Oh, yeah.
We had to get networks. It was hard. And what did we do this morning? I hit a Zoom switch, you hit your Zoom switch, and here we are, boom.
Right. Well, and in all fairness, I do it both ways. These days, in radio stations, there's still, it's still a little painful because there's still some satellite link ups. But in the same respect, we also do things by Comrex, which is a high grade phone link up. There's still, believe it or not, when you link up to from a studio. Coast to coast, Inside Baseball still wants ISDN link ups from studios.
It's a miracle.
Right. They still run things a little old fashioned over at Premiere. But
it's the 90s. Okay, it's the 90s.
Yeah,
nostalgia.
Yeah, it's nostalgia. There's some areas of the industry that move slow. There's some that move quick. There's.
But I'm not throwing cold water on you, Tim.
Okay.
I'm just saying what would happen if we advance the conversation? And we can talk about that after the break.
Sure,
if
let's
you want
do
to.
that.
But
let's do that.
I guess you're supposed to go away now for, do the advertising thing.
Yeah,
as your attorney and agent, I strongly advise you to get money in the building.
I appreciate that. Let's do that. Let's before we go to break, let's talk a little bit about what you're going to do this weekend, because I suggest you get a little food in your belly, you get out, you have a little bit of fun. Do both at the same time. Jelly Bean and Julia over in Coon Rapids has the best smoked prime rib dinner you'll ever have in your life. Probably one of the top 5 meals. Oh, I'm telling you, Don. One of the top 5 meals you'll have in your life, my friend. Corey and Coley.
This is not fair. I can't get there.
You can if you start now, because they don't serve it until Friday night. So you.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Tim.
So you need to hop in the vehicle and get down here right now. But it is a wonderful smoked prime rib dinner, either 14 or 16 ounce prime rib. I'm telling you, that's just the beginning, and it is smoked all day, my friend, in that wonderful walk-in smoker that they have over there, over on Coon Rapids Boulevard. You also get the wonderful tequila berry salad, that sweet and tangy dressing, along with the bacon bits, the croutons, everything that's in that classic tequila berry salad. You get a Boston baked potato. You know what that is, Don? You ever had the Boston baked potato?
Well, you know, if you were in the United Kingdom right now with the Boston baked potato, that's a really big deal. How do I know that? I have friends in London who absolutely crave and actually call for it, not like an Uber, will have it delivered by an airplane, and they pay huge amounts of money. And are you telling me in the great state of Minnesota where you are, you just need to walk into this restaurant and get one?
Just walk right in.
Okay.
It's just part of the dinner. Just part of the dinner. Plus a wonderful slab of Texas toast. All of that included in the dinner. It's just part of the dinner, Don. Although I shouldn't just say it's just part of the dinner. It's part of one of the most immaculate, wonderful dinners you'll ever have in your life. Top 5, I'm telling you, my friend. That's
okay. So you're going to, when I next to see you next, which is, I don't know when, you're going to take me there.
Yes, we're going. And here's the thing, though. We may have to go a little early. They start serving at 4:30 until it's gone. And I tell you, it fills up quick. So we gotta get in. We probably should go around 5:30. So,
okay. Yeah. All right. I better write that one in there.
That's right.
Tim, you're making me hungry. Okay.
It's real simple though. Jellybeanandjulias.com. Entertainment on Saturday nights. They've got a full bar. They've got a stage for entertainment, and they've got they have the best breakfast too on Saturdays and Sundays. So you've got to check it out. I'm telling you, check out the menus, the specials. Jellybeanandjulias.com. Corey and Coley will treat you like family. And I'm telling you, some of the best, amazing, juicy, tender brisket you've had in your life, Don. This place is amazing.
Oh,
double brine chicken wings as well.
You're being mean. You know, I'm in
sorry.
Canada and I can't get there. I got to bring a passport.
Yep.
But then again, for those of you listening to Tim, get over there and have one for me.
Yeah, it's that smoked prime rib. I'm telling you, Don, come down here. I'll treat you. It's going to be amazing. Jellybean and Julia's, Coon Rapids Boulevard, Coon Rapids, Minnesota. Jellybeanandjulias.com. Check the link in the description of this program. We'll be right back with Don Hill. We'll talk more about the God helmet, and we'll talk about the discrepancies between what we were talking about before with Don Hill next, right here on the Best in Paranormal Podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. Welcome back to the Best in Paranormal Podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. My guest is Don Hill. We're talking about the work of Michael A. Persinger, the God helmet, and I guess updating it for the 21st century, and also talking about some of the madness going on in the world and how it's controlling some of the paranormal phenomena that we're seeing today in today's world, including hauntings, some of the UFO activity we're seeing, some of the madness we're seeing in general in the world today, and how we're affecting our paranormal activity in the world today. Don, before the break, we were talking a little bit about the haunted house that you grew up in. And I want to get back to that.
Yeah, but first off, you made me hungry, and that was mean.
Yeah, I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to. But I'm serious. Get down here. I'll treat you to a smoked prime rib dinner. I'm going over there Friday. I try not to miss one. You could tell by the size of my belly, I don't miss too many of them. I lived in the Canadian Rockies.
If you know where Montana is, I'm sure most Americans do. There's a skiing community called Banff. It's, again, in the Canadian Rocky Mountains. And the community next door to it's called Canmore. And it's an old mining town. All right? So in the 1990s, my family, we lived in what was a classic haunted house. Now, at that time, it had poltergeist effects. It had things exploding. It had lots of dead animals showing up. All the classic haunted house. And the emotions were amplified, my sense of fear, and I was befriended because at that time, I have to give a little bit of background. I'm a media host. I'm a radio host on the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. I also make a lot of television, and I'm known as a journalist in this country, Canada, back then, and still to effect to this day. So, how many journalists do you know other than Art Bell go on and, and talk like they do is that, oh, I'm a journalist and I just saw a ghost, because that's what happened.
Yeah.
What happened was a colleague of mine and friend, who's also happened to be a town councilor in the town that I'm in, a politician. We went into the basement, to the sub-basement of this home that I was in, this house, and we both saw something. Okay, we couldn't completely agree on what we saw. It was like an apparition. But more important to me, I felt a wave of fear, which was just like, and coldness and all that kind of stuff that took place. And that stuck with me. Now, we did move out of the house, and I ended up in Vancouver. Curiously, at the time, The X-Files was being produced in the 1990s. And so some of these conversations were now possible. I was watching on New Year's Eve, like we tend to do, either television or among friends. And instead of Dick Clark with the ball going down in Times Square, there was another show about paranormal stuff going on. And it's the first time I saw Michael Persinger. And he's on this program and he's talking about some stuff. And I said, wait a minute, he's talking about something that I experienced. Time passes. I'm back at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. I'm hosting at this time. I had to get a job for a number of reasons I'll talk about later, because I ran out of money in Vancouver. Vancouver's a funny place, not Vancouver, Washington. I'm talking Vancouver, British Columbia. It's a great place to be if you're a sign painter or making crafts, or if you're an American coming up to do what we will call a runaway production from Hollywood. More blah, blah, blah. I'll stop.
Right.
But it's not a great place to be if you're an actor or somebody who's a writer and stuff like that. It's largely like Lego. They put stuff together, and it took me 4 years to figure out that, maybe I shouldn't be here. So we had to boot it back to, in this country, our version of New York, which is like Toronto. Okay. Right. This is where media headquarters are. Yeah. Anyway, more blah, blah, blah. I'm in Sudbury, Ontario, where I get a job again, reading the news on a Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Oops, sorry, I just bashed my microphone there. On a Canadian Broadcasting Corporation regional plant. And it also happens to be the place where Laurentian University is, in Sudbury, and that's where Michael Persinger is. And all the while I was asking questions as I was going along, saying, as a journalist, I know this guy, and he says he saw some ghosts and stuff like that. There's nothing to this. The guy meaning me. Yeah. And by this time, we start hearing things about the God helmet. We'll get to that in just a moment. But I should clarify, it's actually the Koren helmet, not the Koran. Stanley Koren, Koren, right, who's the co-inventor. But what happened is another journalist came into the lab later on and nicknamed it the God helmet, and that stuck.
Right. Yeah.
So we'll get to, you know how these things go.
Yeah.
So anyway, more blah, blah, blah. And I've been commissioned to do a documentary, as it was back then. Okay, long form documentaries on radio. So if you've heard things like This American Life,
yes,
it's kind of like those kinds of programs. Like this first persons or documentary things. And I got a commission to do this thing. So anyway, I ended up in the lab in Sudbury, Ontario. I'm having my temporal lobes stimulated with the God helmet per se, and I'm in a sensory deprivation chamber, so there's no outside influence, and I experienced the ghost again.
Whoa.
I felt the wave of fear. I saw the eyes. I saw the apparitions, all these things. And I said, that's it. It's all in my head, right? It's obviously something going on in the environment. That's not the complete story, okay?
Right.
But remember, subjectively, let's just say, Tim, just play with me for a minute here. Okay?
Sure.
You've often heard these stories. Like somebody will go, I saw the Mother Mary, okay? And that's well known across history, okay? Then somebody else who lives 3 blocks away said, I saw Elvis. And 3 blocks in the neighborhood next door over there, somebody said, I saw a UFO. The only thing we should agree on is that people saw something. But subjectively, it has to be Elvis, it has to be Mary, it has to be a ghost. So that's what Michael Persinger was talking about, the neural correlates, neurons in your brain, can be recruited to bring about a specific affect. Now, for those of you who are listening and saying, oh, I think there's something to this, there might be some people, for example, you're in Minnesota, so you know about Prince.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the color purple, right?
Yep.
But maybe you didn't know about Mozart, because Mozart, the composer, also was a synesthete. What is that? That's a crossing of sensory modalities. So in other words, when he heard a sound, a very specific sound, he saw purple. Mozart did.
Okay.
And so this is well quantified right now in science as the crossing of sensory modalities. So what I'm going is, gabbers like me and gabbers like you, we wouldn't be in this business unless we were, right? Are kind of artistic, and we read a lot of things into a lot of things. And so that's why I was not throwing cold water on you, saying it's natural for you in this wash of white noise to hear voices coming out of it. Because subjectively, you're in a location, like I did in a haunted house. It must be a haunted house, right? Because this is what haunted houses do. But if I'm in a lab 3,000 kilometers or like 2,500 miles away, and I experience the same thing, well, what just happened there? So I started to look into what's going on in the environment. There's a low-frequency infrasound, mining, tectonic, in other words, underground, releasing things. And so that's resulted in this curiosity I have, was basically investigating all what we would call high strange, not to explain it away, but to account for it. Now, Tim, just before we took the break and just before we got on here, I asked you to ask me a question about Jung. So rather than me going on like I do, why don't you ask me the question, why this is so significant, especially now?
Sure. Well, we were talking a bit about, you had asked, or we were talking about the strangeness that was going on in the world.
Yeah, in the world right now.
And talking about how things were kind of out of control. And you had mentioned something about the theory of Jung and how you had said something about, well, there's a theory about Jung, or Jung had come up with a theory about how it was something having to do with us. And you said Jung had a theory. And you said, ask me about Jung and what Jung's theory was that had to do with the paranormal and us.
So the first thing we should do, right, it's not Neil Young.
No, it's not Neil Young. No, it's Carl Jung. Carl Jung, yes.
Carl Jung, right? Yes. The great Carl Jung, who worked with Sigmund Freud, and what they drew attention to in the early part of the 20th century, Freud was interested, by the way, Freud, before we go too much further, in the late 19th century, all these guys were wired on coke. I'm not talking Coca-Cola like you're doing right now.
Right here,
No. They were wired on the real deal. I mean, and they were all exploring really wild and crazy stuff that was going on in the late 19th century. Why? Because of technology. You've got radio in terms of telegraphy. You've got X-rays. You've got all these wild and crazy things going on in terms of technology. And so they were also experimenting in terms of looking into the psyche. William James, the great William James, arguably the father of psychology, at that small little place called Harvard University in Massachusetts, comes up with these ideas. And they had the technology at the time to look into them, including the pharmacology. So then they were starting to becoming aware that this is tragic, folks, but all those people that you see bent over in the streets right now, and they're hooked on, I don't even want to mention the name, but you know what I'm talking about, right? I have talked to a couple of those people, and one fellow said to me, he says, you don't understand, when I'm in this state of mind, you see things that takes him outside of the present consensus reality. Now, hold on to that thought.
Okay.
So Carl Jung had a break with Freud. Freud thought that it was all repressed sexual energy, et cetera, et cetera. And when Freud started to quarrel with Jung, when Jung was talking about the collective unconscious, when he was talking about high strange phenomena that have never, ever gone away, they've always been with us in terms of humanity. And he wanted to investigate this. And Freud, more or less, he said, well, listen, we just got the folks to agree to talk about what we talk about in psychiatry. We can't talk about this stuff yet. So I'm really simplifying this. So they broke. Okay, they went in two different directions. So Carl Jung, explored what we call the unconscious, and late in life, in the 1950s, he wrote a book which was attacked about flying saucers. Now, let's not forget, folks, that in 1947, 1948, we're dealing with events now that were resolved in 1947-48, creation of the United Nations, the State of Israel, all these kinds of things. And these problems didn't go away in terms of anxiety in the culture. It's been ramped up. And what Jung noted was that, remember, the atomic bomb, the weapon that wiped out Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and also all the tests that were going on in the American Southwest in particular, was producing in the Cold War tremendous anxiety. I grew up, I'm not a young man, and arguably, Tim, you're not either, but you remember maybe, I remember as a kid that we thought we were all going to be wiped out. We were hiding under our desks, duck and cover. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 or thereabouts. Tremendous anxiety in the culture. All right, hold that thought. Also, what Jung noticed, remember the first big UFO flap was in the 1940s, late 40s. UFOs over the White House, Eisenhower gets involved, and all these kinds of things. And Jung had this wonderful idea. He said, look, isn't this interesting that every time the culture gets anxious about annihilation, these high strange phenomena show up? Flying saucers are geometry, not necessarily saucers. Remember, I'm saying before, I saw this thing, this must be a ghost. And then I realized that I'm somewhere else, and I'm being triggered to subjectively put a layer on something. As my biochemistry is changing, I'm seeing things. Anxiety. Is this making sense, Tim?
It's making perfect sense. Now, I have another, you're telling me to hold on to stuff, but I have something to throw at you, but go ahead.
Please do. Yeah. Oh, okay. So in conclusion, he wrote this book and he said, look, is it possible that all these phenomena that we're witnessing around the world, and remember, late 1940s, early 1950s, big, huge UFO flaps, lights in the sky, all kinds of maximum weirdness going on, high strange, right? Is it possible that we, humans, we're producing this? We are manifesting these effects. And he left it at that. Wham! Community goes nuts, right? This is like that. That still hasn't been completely resolved. What we do know is that when you put people under extreme pressure, cortisol, the stress hormone, is amplified. Okay. Here's the second point. Tim, I don't recognize that you don't look like a boozer to me, so we're not going to get loaded at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
No,
but let's just say we did. Okay?
Yeah.
Let's just say we're old style broadcasters way back when. We're on the radio and we're going on like we do. We've heard these stories, right? Some of them are true.
Our mentors were big cigar and whiskey guys, but
blah blah blah. You get with the cigars and stuff. But what I'm getting at is within 6 to 8 hours, the alcohol clears our system and we become normal again, so to speak. Okay. Now, I haven't got those exact, but the thing about cortisol, it takes sometimes days to clear the system. And if you keep punching the immune system, the cortisol increases. It doesn't dissipate until it starts to overflow and manifest perhaps as these energies. Is this starting to sound a bit like what's going on?
Yeah.
And then all you have to do, this is Professor Persinger's thing, is that when you have the zeitgeist, that collective community of unconscious, right, perturbed, it doesn't take a lot more to push them over the edge. And then you have what the Lizard King, Jim Morrison from The Doors said, was a kind of a group mind that he played with, he played upon. He realized, and anybody that stood in front of, I've been in front of thousands of people, will realize, and if you're a musician, you know exactly what I'm talking about, that the room or the crowd has a personality. And I think I see Tim nodding here. For those of you who don't see,
I did 10 years in pro wrestling, my friend. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And then you know that there's a kind of groove going on, and that's why people want to be in there. And and I know that it doesn't take a lot to push that into an edge. But mercifully, those of us that do know, like yourself, Tim, and myself, we don't do it. But what would happen if you didn't think like Tim and Don thinks? And this is where we're at, friends, right now. So what I'm saying over and over again, check your environment, see what's going on. And Look for those triggers and then say to yourself, is this me being angry, or is this something that's pushing me to be in this state of mind? And that's what Michael Persinger was going on about, is basically there are subtle energies, and it doesn't take a lot to move you a bit over the edge to do some things that maybe you might not be so happy about later on. I'll leave it at that right there.
Well, Don, here's what I was going to bring up. You talk about...
Yeah, please.
To kind of advance Michael Persinger's theory, I'll call it a theory for right now, but to advance that further. And I want to advance it to current day. And to what's going on currently with disclosure. And I want to drop this right back in that bucket.
Yeah.
And it's this. You talk about President Trump saying, okay, release the files. And you talk about the hearings that have been happening on Capitol Hill, even for the last 6 months. Yep. It's that slow buildup of anxiety. At first it was, okay, little dribs and drabs. Here's a video. Here's this. Oh, there's a whistleblower, Grush. We're going to put him on Capitol Hill, but he doesn't say much. And it's, there's frustration. Oh, why doesn't he talk about more? How come he doesn't talk about alien human hybrids? How come they're not talking about this? They're not talking about this. And you're feeling the frustration coming from the general public. And then finally Trump says, all right, release all of it. But you don't get it right away, right? You get the tease, so you feel the frustration. And then Spielberg says, okay, we're going to release Disclosure Day, but it's going to be this summer. And then you've got and again, this is the rumor and the innuendo that, all right, you've got the Roswell anniversary coming this July.
47. Right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this is supposed to be it. This is supposed to be this is supposed to be Disclosure Day. The real Disclosure Day is supposed to fall on the anniversary of Roswell, right around, the 250th anniversary of our country.
Yeah.
Isn't that something? That it's all supposed to line up?
Isn't it?
Yeah. So you kind of feel the manipulation. And in wrestling, we call it a work, Don.
Oh, you got it right. Yeah. Put the sleeper hold on them, right?
Yeah.
Put the sleeper hold. Right. Okay, so let's just take a little bit of what you're saying there, okay? Mm-hmm. Let's begin with the motion picture industry. Now, one of the movies that do you remember Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skulls thing?
Yep.
All right. So who was the producer of that movie?
Spielberg.
And who is the producer of Disclosure?
That'd be Mr. Spielberg.
And then do you remember the Crystal Skulls thing? I was down in New Mexico at the time, and also in Sedona in Arizona. There's a longer story here, and you should ask me about that. Maybe not today. We should do this again because I think we enjoy each other's company.
I think so too.
I think so too. Two old guys talking, right? Yeah. And the big thing that was going on in Sedona was the Crystal Skulls were coming in advance of the movie, generating boomf. Okay.
Yep.
I'm not going to step in anybody's way that's trying to generate enthusiasm for an entertainment. I mean, you work with Art Bell, you know exactly what I'm talking about, or at least the progeny of Art Bell.
Yep.
But there's a funny mix between getting people inside the tent, and once they're inside the tent, what do you do with them? Right. And so what I'm getting at on the Disclosure Project, or whatever that is, there are real phenomena, but it isn't perhaps what you like to think it is. I want to go back to what Jung was saying. What happens if it's us that's manifesting that? Now, over the years, over the decades, I've been with individuals. I've been with Ingo Swann. I've been with Sean Harabantz. I've been talking to people like Shirley Black, and they are able to manifest through means that we don't entirely understand, through their own sense of who they are, all kinds of very strange, odd, but human activities manifesting psychokinesis, as we call it, these kinds of stuff. We don't know why it works, but it seems to be coming from those individuals. Now, let me just back up a bit more. Ingo Swann, who is part of the remote viewing project, you might remember Stargate, etc. Right. He came to the lab in Sudbury at Laurentian University, and he submitted himself to all kinds of extensive testing. I was around in the room. I recorded conversations with Ingo. I'll get to that in just a second, because it's not the conversation you might be thinking about remote viewing, but it's connected to it. Okay. But what we measured, and I was part of the lab by this time, is that Ingo has a different brain. different central nervous system. And then when he went into his particular states of mind, his brain changed. I mean, in terms of the brain signatures, electroencephalograph, etc. So that's interesting. Now, remember, these are human beings, and they're able to do things. Now, the conversation I had with Ingo, and you can hear it. Do you mind if I mention where folks can go, or do you want to do that?
Please do. Yeah.
Go to Don Hill, my name, DonHill.substack.com, and you subscribe. You can see all this stuff for free. Don't worry about it. If you want to throw in a few bucks into the plate, great, but don't feel that you have to. But you can hear the Ingo Swan conversations. What am I talking to Ingo about? Art.
Really?
He's talking about visual art. Yes. Why? He's talking about the theosophists of the late 19th century, this Madame Blavatsky. I remember all that period of time where people were very open-minded about the mind, okay, about invention. Let's not forget people like Nikola Tesla was claiming that they were getting otherworldly conversations. Tesla in particular, I think was in Colorado Springs at the time, he was claiming that he was hearing communications from Mars, the Space Brotherhood, as it was called, and he gave newspaper reports accordingly. But what we now know today through our hardware is he was recording a pulsar, which is actually a radio signature coming from space. This is a star, or is spinning so fast it has a beat frequency. You might think it's disco. You don't know, right? But let's not also forget that beat frequencies, hold on, folks, I'm going to do something very strange here, okay? So very, very quickly, people entrain. Okay, so he's hearing a pulsar, and it's going ping, 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 like that, and what is he doing? He's this brilliant mind, right? So Ingo was very attentive to these kinds of things. And he said, don't do analytical overlay, subjective experience. What the representational painters were doing, meaning abstract art, they were just recording their impressions. They weren't making a picture. They were just recording what they actually saw when they were in that state of mind. Think about that. That is a right? So that's what Ingo and I talked about for a little over an hour. There's a couple parts to that conversation. And the second thing about Ingo, which is interesting, what do we mean by time? Like, he didn't know if he was looking in the future or in the past when he was in that meditative state of mind.
That's very
interesting. And so therefore he didn't drive. I talked to him about that, not because he couldn't drive, he just didn't trust himself, because he couldn't know if the stop sign per se was there now or in the past or in the future.
Yeah.
Isn't that a wow, right?
Yeah.
So all these folks were coming to Sudbury, this out of the way podunk place, and basically we were able to spend days with these smart people without bombarding them with this, that, and the other thing about, you have to prove that you know these things. So I recorded these conversations and I bequeath them and put them out there, and do what you will with them, but take a step forward. So I'm not pouring cold water on anything, Tim.
Okay. I'm
just saying let's take the next step and ask ourselves what's going on with our human central nervous system.
Okay.
How, and because you and I have been, we've been radio disc jockeys.
Yeah.
And you did it beforehand. I mean, we did this sell because you want these guys to go and support the business, right? Why not?
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, I'm making an assumption here, but I'm assuming, because I think you're a nice man, that you've actually gone to this place and eaten, and you wouldn't tell. You wouldn't shoot crap.
I love the place.
Listen, folks, go here. I've been there. You'll like it, right? That kind of thing.
I eat there once a week.
And so what I'm saying is this. If you have an open mind, open your mind up to the fact, or not the fact, that what you think is there, but it's not what you think. All right. So I better stop there while I'm ahead, okay, and not start to lose people.
Yeah, right. No, I as far as trying to sum up some points here.
It won't hurt a bit, Tim. Just,
Okay.
Get to the chase.
Trying to sum up some points here. I guess what I find the most interesting about all of this, and I kind of want to work this back to the helmet as well.
Please do.
One of the main points I had that I found interesting is when you're talking to Michael himself.
Yes.
This may seem like a very simple question, but a very weird question. How do you know you're talking to Michael?
Well, first off, let's just back up the truck again.
Sure.
Now you're a broadcaster like me.
Yes.
And I'm hearing conversations that I recorded 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In the instance, I just put out a new one yesterday, and I have them in my headphones and headsets. I'm listening to myself, and I didn't know. If I didn't know that I'm now in 2026, I was in the mind of where I recorded that conversation in 2014.
Okay.
So time is slippery, right?
Right.
So you're absolutely correct. I don't know, and yet I do know, because we're in agreement that today, Tim and I are going to do a bit of fun here. Tim, where are you located right now?
Just outside of Minneapolis.
Okay, how do you know that?
Well, there's a city limit sign, not too far away from me, but
so you have a reference point.
yes,
right?
I do. I have a reference point. Yes,
What year is it?
2026.
How do you know that?
Well, it says so right in the computer tray, right.
You have a reference point.
I have a reference point. Yes.
Okay. Now, what time is it in universe? Where are we? Where are we, or when are we in time right now?
Well, as we're recording, it's Central Time. It's 1:12 p.m.
That's not my question. I said,
okay.
When are we on the timeline across the universe?
Oh.
We don't know.
That's a bigger concept.
We have no idea.
Yeah.
We have no idea. So when people get into a contemplative state of mind, maybe they're navigating time. And that time navigation is not about access, ACCESS, but access, AXIS, to the wholeness of time. That's going back to Ingo. So what you and I just did, and I don't mean to be mean, Tim.
No,
you
you're not
beat
being
me up a bit if you want.
No,
Okay?
no.
Is we don't know when we are, we don't know where we're going, and we don't know what this is really all about. and so it's wonderful to be able to live in an enigma. But our machines are starting to tell us some things, including, now I'm now answering your question, and now it also is partially the reason I think we've already lived this, and Tim and I were kibitzing around before we started the conversation. We're going like, doing what broadcasters do, nonsense.
Right.
You got to keep it light, right?
That's right. That's right.
But if you have access to all of the time, and you have all the information that's ever been recorded, and let's go back a step here. I read this stunning statistic, and I may not have it completely right, but every hour, the amount of data that's generated exceeds everything that's ever been generated up until the time of what we will call the digital revolution, or that all humans have done. We're talking hundreds of thousands, millions of years. Every hour, teraflops of data is generated. And all that data right now is being used, arguably, for artificial intelligences. Of which there are more than 3, by the way. It's not just ChatGPT and Claude. There's like tons of them around there. But they all have access to the same data, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
What it comes down to, friends, is what's your question? All right. If you have all the data and all time available to you, what do you want to know? Now, Tim, you as a broadcaster, you've probably been into our library of records, recordings, and that's like a room full of recordings way back when.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yep.
Now, a long time ago, I took some folks through to a radio station that I worked at that was like a 100-year-old radio station. Like, if I can mention this, like WCCO in Minneapolis, St. Paul is over 100 years old.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So if they have all their recordings there, you probably, if they kept everything, including, transcription discs,
right,
it would occupy buildings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So what are you looking for? Now, if you don't have a directory, right, how can you find anything?
Be pretty
number
tough.
one, right?
Yeah.
But if you have an agent looking for it for you, right? You put something out there. So this is going to sound weird. I'm not even sure about this myself. We have consensus reality right now. You are listening to Tim and Don in particular going on like he does. That's in our consensus reality. You will drift off into space. You might have a dream, all right, that. And what happens if Tim and Don show up in your dream? Is that broadcasting? I don't know. What is that, right? We don't know.
Right.
So now I'm answering your question. I'm seeding the digital cloud, so to speak, with a lot of Michael Persinger, and by virtue of the fact that, like our conversation, I'm also part of it, okay?
Okay.
So I'm going to add one more thing, and hopefully this still makes sense. You probably are, if you're a person of faith, let's just say, you probably heard from your faith leader that it's very important to keep the ritual, whatever it is of your faith tradition. Okay. Why? Because if you maintain the ritual that has been bequeathed to you by your ancestors, and you respect that ritual and you follow it to the letter, you are literally in the mind of your ancestor as much as you may be in the mind of your future progeny, if they maintain the ritual. Is this making sense what I just said?
You lost me a little bit, but
well, it has to do with
I'm getting it.
Kneeling and singing and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
So the idea is, if you maintain the purity of the data, the connection,
okay,
you actually suspend time. You're in the time of your ancestors as much as you're in the time of the future.
Okay.
Now, you don't have to believe that, but in my investigations, I'm beginning to believe more and more of the value of certain traditions and ritual as we build out these digital platforms.
Okay.
That's what I'm getting at. And we might be on the verge of understanding that we're transcending our biology.
Okay.
And more important, we are building upon our curiosity as we start to move out into space.
You said
That's
something,
basically where I'm getting at.
you said something interesting about faith. Has Michael ever said anything to you that has made that faith get shook? So in other words, has he ever said anything that made you go, maybe I'm not talking to Michael?
That's an interesting question in the sense that I'm not sure exactly what the frame of reference is, but what I can say, he was agnostic. Okay. If that's what you're pointing toward. Yeah.
Maybe. But I'll give it to you in this sense. So when you're talking to somebody on the other side, and I'll put it in the frame of a psychic. Okay. So a psychic, when they're talking to somebody on the other side, will ask for verifiers. So I've noticed, like in a few of the Substacks, you will ask, was that in a period where you were in Canada, or was that in the period where you were there, or was this your first or second wife? And they'll say, no, I had two wives. Or he'll say, I had two wives.
This is Michael Persinger. This is Michael Persinger.
Michael Persinger, right. So he'll say, no, I had
not me. I've only had one wife.
No, right. But he'll tell you about his history, and he'll say, no, this is this person. This happened at this point in my history, and he'll try to give you verifiers, much like when a psychic would ask, would you please clarify? Would you give me this piece of information? Will you verify this? So it seems like as you're going along and you're talking to Michael, you're asking for verifiers, like a psychic would ask for verifiers. Has there ever been any time in those conversations when you ask for a verifier and Michael throws out a piece of information and you go, that doesn't feel right to me?
Well, we've been very forthright. There's that fancy word, and very honest with one another about what we don't know and what we do know. I can't honestly say in my memory, mind you, I have to go over through these conversations because I do push back on a few things as you've spotted.
Yep.
But let me just roll back a bit before I answer your question directly.
Sure,
okay.
Sure.
A lot of people have asked me as well, and you're right. How did Michael Persinger end up in Canada when he comes from a family of military heroes? I don't know if you knew this. His dad, in the Second World War, was on the Lexington. And that was, among other things, in the Japanese, the Pacific Theater in the Second World War. Some pretty terrible things were going on, like whether it's Iwo Jima, these kinds of things. And his dad was an engineer, and he lost a lot of colleagues who got eaten by sharks, stuff like that. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's rough, right? Yeah. And it's just kind of like the weirdness that's going on today. We have no idea what next week is going to look like, especially in the Persian Gulf, whatever. And his mother, in the family, he has a sister. told me about in the family, there was a relative, there's reputed that we will call it to be psychic. Okay. But Michael himself said, no, I'm psychically dead. I don't have anything. But when he was a kid, just to stay with that, his dad being still in the military, Navy, and Wisconsin, by the way, this, so they come from, but again, military families in the States, they move around quite a bit, so he was in Florida, among other places. He recalls, and I think you heard the conversation of how he got interested in, as a kid, in a kind of a Charles Fort account of, frogs falling from the sky, and he's a kid, like, how is this possible, and these kinds of things. And later on, his sister telling me, who lives still in Wisconsin, that he had all kinds of enthusiasms, including the ubiquitous chemistry set in the basement, and then using his sister as the little assistant and blowing stuff up, and those kinds of things. But initially out of the gate, he fancied himself as a kind of a William Faulkner type Southern writer. And he went through a lot of whiskey, and he realized that maybe I'm not such a great writer after all. But psychology at the time, in the 1960s, was exciting. And parapsychology was still very much a thing. And he had these experiences, and his dad, Milo, seemed to be also an interesting person as well in terms of his inventiveness. Up until the early 1960s, Milo was still working with the U.S. military. He was working on different patents and stuff like that. So why am I telling you all this? Because if you're working in that particular space, you get to work with all the nice, new, bright, shiny objects, toys, right? Things, whether it's the stuff that goes boom or the stuff that's really interesting. Now, let's not forget as well that in the 1950s and 1960s, there was a fear that mind control, especially in the Russian side of the fence, was being exerted upon the minds of U.S. servicemen, and et cetera, et cetera. I think and there's the MK Ultra experiments. There's all these kinds of stuff that took place using pharmacology again. And it was legal. LSD was legal at the time, but maybe people didn't know what was going on. So this is all pretty exciting stuff going on. He's a young undergraduate. Michael Persinger is a long distance runner. He's at Carroll College, and as a long distance runner, he was competitive. He was a state level athlete in Wisconsin. And when you're running, or if anybody knows what I'm talking about, doing long swimming and stuff like that, stuff literally bubbles up. Where do these ideas come from? He started asking these kinds of questions. And the only way that those questions were answered was two ways. One is, that's the angel speaking. Let's just say we're Jesuits from it, or it's the devil speaking. Right. Yeah. And the Jesuit church and the Catholics, I'm being very serious about this, do have an office of the Inquisition still to this day to determine whether that voice that you heard was the angels talking or the devils. And let's not forget the Vice President of the United States is sort of talking about this stuff too at this point, right? Yeah. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Okay, so what does this all have to do? So then what Michael realized is he started to dive into the stacks, that in the late 19th century, a lot of really, really, really smart people with very interesting technology were starting to investigate what we would call high strange, and then something happened. And what happened was, and I know this sounds like a conspiracy, but it isn't, is that the people who make the world go round also know that this is true. So what Tim and I were talking about, not more than 20 minutes ago, about how crowd control works. Anybody who really understands how this works realizes there's a connection between media, storytelling, the story of Jesus. We love Jesus. Why do we love Jesus? Well, because he's a nice man, right? But how do we know he's a nice man? Saul of Tarsus, who was a disbeliever, didn't believe anything, right? And then he saw, if it was not for Paul, you wouldn't know about Jesus. It's the storytellers. So what we call them now are psychics. What we call the storytellers now are people like you, Tim, arguably people like me, who are reporting these kinds of things, that there's something is going on here. And then that has been noted. Let's not forget that the folks in Iran right now, it's a theocracy, folks. Okay, it's what they believe.
Yeah.
And here's my last point. What Michael was investigating was what I'm investigating. And the fancy word is ontologies. Ontologies means beliefs, rituals, which give rise to a culture. If you can understand what people believe in, then you can understand their behaviors and why they do the things that they do. And it wasn't a simple religious thing. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a simple psychological thing. It was parapsychology, which is to this day is now being denigrated. And what these other guys were going on, we need to explore this a bit more. We need to put some money into this. We need to account for all these things. And if I can go back a step,
sure.
If Jung is even partially right, then we owe it to ourselves to investigate if we are producing this phenomena that is being recorded as lights in the sky, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that's a long answer to a short question, Tim. I'm sorry, but...
No, it's perfectly fine. Let me ask you this again before we leave people today. You know, tulpas are a very real thing, in something that we've talked about on this program before. The idea that you can sit in a room, you can have a bunch of people come up with a story about a ghost. You and I can come up with a story about a ghost together. We can tell a group of people about that ghost, and it can become very real.
Yeah, and that's what I get. That's the famous Philip experiment that took place in the 1960s. And that was, again, part of that backdrop I'm talking about, is that we can induce people to believe something and that they will actually record they do believe it.
Yeah.
Okay. That doesn't make them bad people.
Right.
It's just like the kid lost in the story in the mall story, right?
Right.
You repeat it until they repeat it.
Right.
It's a consensus. And Charles Tart, the great parapsychologist, transpersonal psychologist, I remember talking to him years about that. It's called the consensus trance, and we may be in one right now.
So you think potentially the ramping up of a lot of this activity is that consensus Tart?
Yeah, and unless you can get outside, have you ever gone to a bar where everybody's drunk and they're laughing like crazy?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And you were saying, what are these people laughing about?
Right. Yeah.
All right. And then you have a few drinks and you join in the laughter.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get at. So if you're coming in from the outside, it doesn't make any sense until you get in with the flow, that kind of stuff. Right. So all of this kind of stuff that I'm talking about right now, Esalen back in, I'm talking about California, they were investigating these kinds of transpersonal psychologies about going on. But what it really gets down to is mind control and manipulation. And what I'm trying to do is provide a prophylactic and saying, please, yes, I'm not denigrating you had an experience. I've had an experience, but I've had that experience reproduced thousands of miles away in a lab by inducing with subtle energies. Mm-hmm. And it's not the punch in the head. Let me give you one more example.
Sure.
All right. I don't want to punch you in the head.
No.
But if you do, that's a lot of energy, right?
Right.
But a mosquito just landed on your hand. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do?
Generally smack it.
Bingo. Look at the energy that you put into it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So I could say something really obnoxious and mean and you want to punch me in the head, but it's like that. But it was just a little bit of energy, the mosquito bite, that bit of pattern information causes you to get that whack, right?
Right.
And that's what these subtle energies might be doing, is they're triggering the central nervous system to have a bigger amount of energy. I think that makes sense what I just said there.
Yeah, completely.
Don't slap yourself silly, please. Don't do that.
No. So then if we've got this collective consciousness that's raising everything to a fever pitch, how do we de-escalate then?
Now, the detorque on this, and I think that's what you're saying, is I don't know, but I'm saying we should investigate it.
Yeah. I mean,
you lived through the whole situation in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and I don't have to go into the details.
Right.
How is that detorqued?
You
see what I mean?
Yeah,
we don't have to go there because it's uncomfortable.
Because
having ice come in, did that make it better?
No. but you know what seemed to make it better was promising, not just promising that there was a resolution, but to actually see that there was a removal of of ice out of the community.
Now stay with that a moment more, okay?
Okay.
So that took time.
Mm-hmm.
It took time to do that.
And
Remember
it's
what's
still
going on
taking time.
about cortisol?
Yeah.
Like that, it takes time.
Right.
So first thing is to reduce the anxiety.
Right.
But what's happening in the culture now, we're not reducing the anxiety, we're ramping it up. Like, what are you paying for gas today? Is it $8?
Oh, it's no. Well, here in the Twin Cities, we're at, I believe we're at almost $4 a gallon. But we see our gas is subsidized by the state, so we're lower than the rest of the nation. So, but there is places in the nation where you're well over $4.
And you know that some people are having a terrible time meeting their obligations, just paying rent, right?
Yeah.
And they don't have a future, and they're upset, and you can see how this gets. And then you have outside operators working in the digitalverse with and putting out basically bull crap. You know, I'm respectful of the fact that we have to be slightly censored here, but fill in the blanks. And this is going on, and nobody knows what to believe these days. And then you see something where you're having to make a decision in a split second. I'll give you one more example. I talked to some Czechoslovakian filmmakers who in events of 1968 in Czech, when the Russians, the Soviets at the time, ordered tanks into Prague, and the filmmaker guy that I actually worked with, he had to make a decision: do I run back to my house, or do I run away from the tank? The guys that ran back to their houses ended up having to stay. The guys that ended up running away ended up in North America, in this case Canada, and having to start completely from scratch. But that was the right decision.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But how could you know, right?
Yeah.
There's a tank coming out. That kind of. So if the tanks are arriving right now, and the society or whatever is already perturbed, what's it going to take to detorque that? I don't know. But what I do know is we have to pull back a bit.
Yeah.
Just to reduce the anxiety. And that's the other thing that we noticed, that when you. I'm doing this from memory right now. My own anxiety that took place in my first encounter with the Corin so-called God helmet, after they had to stop the experiment, by the way, and I account for this in a television film I did for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Michael actually had to come out. They stopped the experiment because I was becoming over-anxious.
Really?
Again.
Huh.
Yeah, I was just like that. And then he came out like that, and we had to do a couple things like that. And me even just thinking about this right now, I just had a kind of a shiver of recognition.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a kind of an arty guy, and I suggest that you are too. So those of us who are predisposed to artful ways of engaging our communities, and I think broadcasting is a good example of that, let's just say we're a bit more sensitive.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
That's fair. Yeah.
And so the anxiety is something that I had to pull back from. Michael told me later on that it was like literally white as a ghost. I mean, when I came out of the chamber like that. So what am I saying? That subtle energies, it's the subtle stuff that perhaps spooks me the most.
Yeah.
It's not the in your face that you can look at, and so we need to, I'll leave it at that. We need to ramp things down before things get really out of control.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, folks, you can go to donhill.substack.com. We'll have a link in the description of this program. Again, It's free to subscribe. I encourage you to go there. Check out these Substacks that Don has with Michael. They're incredibly fascinating. A lot of the things that you...
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, that you've put together, the stuff that you have there is fascinating. Just the conversations alone, I think, are to think that you've reached out to the other side, that you've gotten a hold of Michael, that you're having this back and forth there, and you're trying to work out this conundrum that we're having right now.
Well, I'm not so sure that I've reached out to the other side per se. I'm saying is that if there is an experiment, if there is one, whereby wouldn't you want to have a scientist who's agnostic exploring a question from the so-called other side, and finding a way to report back to the culture. Okay, that's all I'm saying. Right?
Yeah.
But the other thing is just not. These are not conversations I recorded with a ghost. Okay, these are conversations I recorded over the last 25 to 30 years. They're actually recordings of conversations, but they sound as if they happened today.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the oddball thing. Now, in terms of visitations, if you ask me the question, have I heard from Michael in the dream space? Yes, I have.
There you go.
But is that me? Is that, I don't know. Okay. But I do know
take
that
your
I missed
best
the guy.
guess, Don. I'm going to ask you to go out.
If you're out there, Michael, and you want to contact me, I'm in.
I want you to go out on a limb, though, Don. Don't
go ahead.
Don't be on the fence about this. I want you to go out on a limb and just tell me he's in your dreamscape. I want you to tell me dream visitation, yes or no.
It's a dream visitation, but it's not a language. It's sometimes it's a single word.
But I want you to tell me, do you believe it is his spirit in your dream? It is a true dream visitation. His ghost came to you and his spirit has visited you. Yes or no?
I go KNOW.
I don't want you to be on the fence here. I want you to tell me,
I'm not trying to be mean, Tim.
Do you believe in your heart of hearts, do you believe he has come and visited you?
I honestly don't know. I don't know. I do know that when you have precious friendships and you miss people, they do show up. However, is that a manifestation of my own, whatever? I don't know. But what I do know is this, that the information that I got from that dream was accurate.
Okay.
And accurate within a 2-week window. Now, I used to say 72 hours. Now it's about 2 weeks. Now, I'm not the only one that's saying this. There's some other people who are reporting back to me, so we've been sort of checking back and forth. But it is high strange. But at the same time, in terms of verifiable, I can't do it, or at least not yet.
Okay.
Did I answer your question? You honestly, you should do it again. Go ahead.
To a point. You're still kind of waffling a little bit, but I'll take it. I'll take it for what it is.
It's not waffling. I don't want to interfere with people's grieving.
You're not. What I want is your
I'm talking
honest
about not
answer.
you. I'm not talking about you. I want to go back. We just went through COVID-19.
Sure.
I'm sure someone knows someone who died, whether they're elderly or not. The last time this happened, where you have this mass death, was also happening in the late 19th century and early 20th century. And for example, the Spanish flu, as they called it. Okay. And then there were a lot of grifters out there who were exploiting people who were grieving their loved ones lost, and this other thing called World War I, which was a catastrophe, kind of like what's going on in Ukraine. Entire generations of young men dead, gone, finished, leaving behind young widows or sweethearts that still wear the engagement ring, and they're 50, 60, 70 years old, as I recorded some people in the 1960s and 70s. So they're grieving, and there are people who claim, I am manifesting, I'm in touch with so-and-so. And the famous story of Conan Doyle, the Sherlock Holmes writer, and the escape artist, who's for some reason I'm having a blank here, Harry Houdini. And Houdini getting together with Sherlock Holmes writer, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Right. He claims his wife is a channeler. Okay.
Yep.
And she's in contact with the dead. And she says, I'm in touch with your mother, to Harry Houdini.
Right. Oh, I'm familiar.
And this is what,
familiar.
And this is what she's saying, but maybe the listener isn't completely saying. Sure. And this is what she's saying. And Houdini's in. I was like, oh, yeah, because he loved his mother and he was very close to her. And he would experience her in dreams. And now I'm answering your question. He experienced his mother in dreams, okay?
Yes.
And now he's hearing through Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's, the Sherlock Holmes writer's wife, that she's in touch. But there was a problem. His mother never spoke English.
Yeah.
And the channeler was speaking in English. So I'm a little wary of trying to say to people that, yes, I'm in contact with this and that, because I don't know. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But the moment I do know, you will be among the first I'll contact him.
Well, good. I'll tell you this much. I myself, and this is only me here, Don, this is nobody else. I myself have had dream visitations in which I've been told very specific information and been told to pass it on to others, which I have.
Yes.
And I've seen jaws hit the floor.
Yeah. Well, Sean Harabantz, again, who's a renowned psychic from the Caribbean, he's gone too, did the same thing. And he would claim, but when we noticed his brain, and there's some papers about this, is that he would get into a similar state to what you're talking about right now. Now, you would know, we're still blabbing here, something called hypnagogia or hypnopompic space. And what is that? This is the space just before you wake up or the space just before you fall asleep. Okay? It's very rich and seems to be a lot of information heavy in there. And I wouldn't be surprised, and to answer your question, is that you were actually in those spaces when this other information arrives. Have I got that right?
Probably. I'm not sure. Again, much like you, I don't know. KNOW.
Yeah, no, but that's what I'm doing, Tim. So that's what I'm saying. And use this. It's not a trick. I'm saying it's not yes or no, because that's a binary, right? Democrats or Republicans. Well, I'll give you a Russian expression. Okay, what if both choices are worse?
Yeah, true. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So that's why I say KNOW, right? Because it gives you a third option, right? No, I'll use that again. Both choices are worse. Okay.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So at this space and time, I realize we got to go soon here. But the point is, we're in a period of time right now where our technology is proposing a few things to actually measure what's going on in our environments, in our central nervous systems, record it, and perhaps play it back. Human beings, like Tim and yours truly, have had experiences. Now, I mentioned Sean Harabantz. When he went into his state, he shocked people in the room and said things that nobody should know. All right. And now, if you have that experience as well, okay, as do I, I've done some, and this is the beauty about our jobs, is that in the interview situation, we have permission to talk to one another and ask questions that sort of arise, right? So I've done this. And a couple of people said, you must be psychic. How could you know this? The answer is, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it popped into my head. I thought I should ask you this. All right.
I don't profess to be psychic. I just happen to have an experience that happened.
And I don't either.
Yeah.
But I just happen to have had an experience.
Right. Exactly.
Ooh.
Yeah. Ooh. Right. Ooh. Right. But I just that's why I ask if you in your heart of hearts believe that you had a visitation.
In my heart of hearts, I'd like to say I've had a visitation. All I can say is I've had an experience in a dreamlike state where I heard some language, some words that turned out to be correct, coming from Michael Persinger. But having said all that, if I was asked to stake this, that, and the other thing on it, and that's what happens in some religions, right? I heard the voice of God, and it told me to go kill that guy.
Well, I'm not asking you to go on a fat war or anything like that.
I'm not saying to go that direction. That's why I'm being cautious. Right?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you've had the experience. Okay. Again, folks.
Okay. Well, just to finish, okay?
Okay, go ahead.
Now I'm going to answer your question, but it's going to be coming from sideways, okay? So I'm in Australia. I'm at a rock art location, which is a petroglyph location. And who is it important to? It's to the Aborigines, the Aborigine people who have marked like that. I go into this rock art location, and I distinctly heard a voice. And the voice said, tell our story, tell it well. And that's for sure. I heard that, and that was a visitation, obviously. And I've carried that with me since, I would say, since the early 2000s when I was there.
Wow.
It was weird. It just popped right in my head. Tell our story, tell it well. But again, it was one of these locations that had a lot of so-called subtle energies going on in it.
Wow.
So think about that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not dodging your question. I'm adding to it. That's what I'm trying to get at.
That's really cool. See, I've never.
But you're living in the great state of Minnesota, okay?
Yeah.
There are locations as which I speak north of you.
Yes. Yeah.
And you should go there. and report back. That's your assignment.
All right.
I'll hear from you in a couple months. What do you say?
Yeah.
Certainly before the fall.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And remember the mosquitoes there are as big as Buicks.
I'll bring a saddle.
Don't especially we don't like those. Lake of the Woods. Can be pretty crazy. Listen, I thank you for your time. We've had a good chat today. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Don. Yes, we have. Don Hill is our guest. DonHill.substack.com. We'll have a link in the description of this program. Don, thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, let's do it again sometime. But remember, you have an assignment, okay?
I do have an assignment. I have to go to northern Minnesota now, and I have to bring waiters. It's hard to do when you have Charcot foot, but I'll figure it out.
What can you do?
I'll figure it out. Folks, we're on the weekend here, so a couple of different things before we leave you today. One, the Darkness Radio Apple app is updated. It's ready for you. Go get it. If you've if you've offloaded it for some reason, put it back on your Apple device. But update it by all means. It's got all kinds of good stuff. It's got a link to the shop, which, by the way, go get your Darkness Radio swag, your True Crime Tuesday swag, and support the show. That's the other note I have for you. 2, go frequent. I know Don's going to hate this. Go frequent our sponsor, Jelly Bean and Julia, today for the weekend. The smoked prime rib dinner is exquisite. Please go get that on Friday night. 4:30 is when they start serving it over there at Jelly Bean and Julia. JellyBeanandJulias.com for all your information there. Our executive producer today is Troy Palmer. Troy, thank you for everything you do. And also, we're on the weekend, and again, it's going to be a little chilly this weekend. There's a chance for snowstorms this weekend. Believe it or not, just a skosh. If it does snow this weekend, remember, you have elderly and disabled people in your family and in your community. Please be a light in someone's darkness this weekend. Go out there, help snow. If they need shoveling, if they need any help with any winter stuff. Believe it or not, middle of April and snow. If they need to be shoveled out, if they need help with anything, please go help out your elderly and disabled folks out there. Be a light in someone's darkness this weekend. A message from your friends here at Darkness Radio. For Beer City Bruiser, for Jessica Freeberg, for Mally Fox, for Travis Thorpe, I'm Tim Dennis. Thank you so much for continuing to listen and watch the best in paranormal podcasting. This has been Darkness Radio.